The bounty hunters. The movements are mesmerizing as she watches the child work. He's following along with a holographic projection to develop close combat skills suitable for a nagasa. Rapid movements to pull the main body out of danger and leverage the enormous strength of the tail. His hands were used exclusively for precision strikes and what would end up as absolutely brutal gouges on helpless opponents. It's an absolute no-bullshit martial art designed to leave your opponents broken, if not dead. The sort of thing that Madame Stepanova can appreciate seeing, even if the subject clearly doesn't appreciate her seeing him. Thankfully, the boy has as much spine as the tale would imply, and he said nothing about her unwanted presence. She said nothing as well. If he doesn't wish to speak, that's just fine. There are many nagasa races, and many of them move in very similar ways. Watching him practice is teaching her exactly where the danger and vulnerabilities of the race are, more than just his race, but all nagasa should have similar difficulties. It had been eye-opening to learn that he was descendant from an immortal people that seamlessly split into many different races, all adapted to differing circumstances. Some had a half-dozen arms and a strong martial culture. Some were limbless with magic rattles. Others held obscenely long and powerful tails that could and have been known to crush full-sized vehicles. The skies and sea were not safe either, with amphibious and gliding variants. Compared to his genetic cousins, the cybernetic snake boy was downright normal. "Is there a reason for your attention, ma'am?" Dr. Cindy Schmidt asks, and Madame Stepanova gives her a glance and huffs a sigh. "I've spent my entire life, lost friends and even family, all for the goal of keeping my homeland safe. I have violated my morals, blackened my heart, and sold my soul. All for the good of my people, all for a single grain of sand barely floating upon an endless ocean. Life sucks, I know," Cindy says before wincing. "I'm sorry, that was harsh. I want him safe, and the only real way he ever will be is if he's strong. I understand." "Are you a mother?" Cindy asks her. No, that was something else I gave up for my country." Madame Stepanova notes as she feels the old knife wound and surgical scars ache ever so slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that. Motherhood is something special. Adopted or born, you suddenly have something you love more than life itself," Cindy says, watching the young man move from careful swaying to suddenly lashing backwards to dodge a simulated blow before wrapping his tail around his assailant, then clawing at the face of his helpless opponent. "It was always the homeland for me. No matter who ran it or what happened, it was always for the motherland," she says, and Cindy nods. "I think I can understand. Is that why you were so angry earlier? My homeland poured an obscene amount of wealth and strength into getting the Dauntless flying. Then when it sends knowledge back, it seems to be filled with nothing short of madness and insulting lies. Lies that now seem to be truth, madness that appears to be the norm." "Oh," Cindy says, and Stepanova has to resist snorting and telling the tiny lizard woman that she looked like some depraved lunatic's wet dream come to life. "To be fair, you humans seem to be pretty ridiculous too. You look like Trets, sound like Trets, but you smell like sex when dead serious, act like any number of apex races, and seem to just playing pretend with your emotions before suddenly erupting into violence. It's scary at times, but exhilarating." Cindy answers back, and Stepanova has to resist cackling as the little lady has just shown herself to be not only a gold mine but a willing one. "How does that happen? Surely you can read the expressions on our faces and our body language." "Well, there are so many races, so much different that most of us learn to pay attention to what a person does to the local axiom. We all use it at all times, so it moves with us. If I get angry or sad or even confused or hurt, then it shows up in the axiom. It's a little different for everyone, but if you're used to sensing it, then you can tell what someone's feeling even if they're hiding it." "And it doesn't work on humans? You don't pull on the axiom. Your bodies don't need it, so any axiom shifting around you means you're actively tapping into it. So it looks like you're putting on a show because you're not churning the local axiom when you look angry. Then all of a sudden you actually are, but your axiom says you're completely calm. It can be scary at times, Cindy admits. Of course it can be amazing too. I try to be sweet and tender to my Gregory, and it almost feels like nothing's going right. Then he's picking me off the ground for a deep, loving kiss, and oh, I'm sorry, I really shouldn't continue. That's all right, dearie. I understand, she says as she seems to be watching the boy scaly when she's also watching Cindy out of the corner of her eye. Her movements are quick and with an energy to them. She's used to being one of the smallest in the room, if not the smallest. This means that she spends most of her time around considerably larger races, such as humans or nagasa, or those gigantic Canador monsters. She wonders for a moment if humans would react in the same way to spending a large amount of time among the Canador. The size difference is roughly the same. So the young man is clearly excelling in his martial arts training, but what about with weapons? Is he good with ballistics, or is he more of a laser and plasma man? Oh? Well, plasma and lasers are easy and make a lot of sense, but those gun things, they're scary powerful for all that they need ammo. But the kickback is scary. Is it really? Most weapons are pretty quiet except for explosives, railguns, or sonic weapons. Explosives are really dangerous, railguns are rare, and sonic weapons are close range, but able to shatter a lot of things. Using any of them mean that something is going on. I think I understand. Although why are railguns rare? Our shields are rated for plasma and lasers, so a railgun would be a great way around it. Oh yes, but then the question of ammo comes up. Plasma has it as a bit of a weakness in that you need to agitate some gases to make it properly. But you can siphon it off a gas giant, clouds in space, and even some cooler stars. That makes sense. There was a mention of a great aversion to weapons that need ammo unless they're truly exceptional. Madame Stepanova remarks as she considers the notes on the weapons she and everyone else had read. If some of them could be manufactured back on Earth, then wars could be shifted with ease. Miss? The teenager notes after a little bit. Apparently he's had enough. Don't like the staring? She asks, and he shakes his head. No, I don't. I understand. Enjoy your exercises, she says before leaving. She'd already learned plenty. There will be further opportunities to study the nagasa. The next place she goes has the sounds of machining and power tools before she even arrives. It's near the rear of the vessel and has Port Vehicle Bay stenciled on the doorway. It's not quite a parking garage. It's more like a series of large shelves with a huge bulkhead door at the end of a small road. Clearly, they're meant to drive their cars right in here and slot them into place. Her attention comes from the source of the noise, and she walks over to find a young man with Latin American features working on what appears to be a large van without wheels. "Afternoon, ma'am." His greeting offered, he promptly turns away and leans into the open front of the vehicle. Shortly after, the sound of something scraping against metal and a part being secured can be heard. "Is there something wrong with that vehicle?" "It's just a tune-up. I'm the main pilot for more sensitive movements, but once you get into the lanes, you can set things to auto pretty easily. So I need to fill the hours." "How many vehicles do you have?" "Lessa. 3 of these vans. Onyx has her bike and the one she's been putting together for Jade. We've got a flying flatbed, 2 cars, one of them Roths, and a large floating mobile platform. So 9 total. But if we need to, we have the spare parts to slap maybe another 2 vehicles together." Airfarce answers easily enough as he pops out. "Is there anything in particular you're digging for, or just bobbing around seeing what can be seen?" "The second at the moment. The big revelations are over with, so I'm just collecting and confirming information." "All right then. How about a bit of a story? This van's seen some fun times." "Oh, do go on." "Right. Well, this baby saw us to one of our more interesting early bounties, and it's what I was driving when I wooed my big onyx love monster. Is that normal? Cross-species dating? I've seen a fair amount of it, but that's mostly due to a lack of women, I assume. Yes and no. Yes for us on the Chainbreaker, and yes for the galaxy. But no, not because it's women that are rare. It's because men are rare. Airfarce says, grabbing a rag and leaning in to wipe something off. The birth ratio around the galaxy is skewed to all hell in favor of women. When you go over a species classification, there is a number over 100, usually A1. That's the number of men per 100 women. So that's another bit of absurd information that's utterly accurate. Afraid so. As far as I understand it, it's an evolutionary thing. If a race is smart enough to use the axiom around them actively, then the differences between male and female only show up in breeding. Axiom allows flash evolution and the inevitable realization that you only really need men when it's time to make babies and no other time sinks into the race, and bam, few if any men. But it should reverse after that. No? Madame Stepanova asks, and he shakes his head. You'd think so. With Axiom, you can sort of control your evolution, so you'd think so, but there's something else going on. I don't know what, though. If I'm talking to the research division, it's how to get everything we possibly can out of our vehicles. Speaking of, this one was used to catch the multi-maimers, a group of sadists joined together by the physical feature of having at least 4 arms. I see. And how does this tie into your meeting that big black monster woman? She was hunting them at the time and heard the report that we had facilitated their arrest. She wanted to scope out the competition, got really cocky and patronizing. Or is it matronizing? Either way, she ran her mouth, so I offered to show her how we did it, and then scared her so badly that I forever broke the idea that I was some cute, defenseless little tret. Which was also the hottest thing she could imagine, so the van got a rockin'. Enough with the crassness, young man. How did a van help with the capture of multi-armed sadists? Well, you're going to need a bit of background into one of their favorite tactics. Not far from the city they held their crime sprees in was a large and treacherous canyon that joined together at the top, making, essentially, a large cave that you could drive a vehicle through that also had light in most of it. However, it also had numerous extremely treacherous turns and angles, and there was a strong magnetic field over the area that stopped specialized soldiers from pinpointing where in the trench they were and grabbing them if they stopped. He explains as he pulls out a small device from his back pocket and places it on part of the engine. That's good. The axiom intake is consistent and even. So I assume that there was a reason why it wasn't simply blocked off or boarded up. They would unblock it and then act exceptionally vicious for a few weeks after in retaliation. So it was left open to not provoke them. Now we would have probably blown the shit out of the canyon or erected a wall halfway through it to really fuck with them, but the locals were vehement that we leave it pristine. Apparently it was a local landmark or something, I don't know. So what we did is that we scouted out the entire run with this van. At first, we inched through it nice and slow to find out where all the danger was. Then we went faster and faster until I could pilot right down it with my foot damn near putting the accelerator through the floor. Let me guess. You beat them at their own game and forced them through the tunnel so fast they made a mistake? Oh no. Many of the races involved had extra senses and reaction times that would let them dodge bullets. We weren't beating them at their own game, but we played it to keep them distracted. Go on. I chased them through the trench with Pukey bombarding them with laser blasts. It wasn't enough to do much more than melt the paint, but it let them know we were right there the whole time. As this was happening, the rest of the team was setting a trap at the first entrance. A series of mortars and a small station to keep track of where everything was. Me and Pukes gave them a good chase and then herded them back to the second entrance, and they took the bait and blasted through as fast as they could. With us right on their tail, they didn't have time to think about what was wrong with the situation, and then the mortars were set off to shred the underside of their vehicle. Wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Quite the way to get a payday. I know, right? Some of our best jobs are like that. Like that group of terrorists that used sound-based axiom techniques to rip apart people and buildings with sonic attacks and avoid capture. We had an entire mission in total silence. We called it Operation Mime Time. Oh, please. Anyways, as to how it endeared Onyx to me, she showed up while we were cleaning up and asked how we did it. After she annoyed me, I offered to show her and floored it right through the canyon. First time, she nearly screamed her heart out. Second time, I did it while singing along to the radio and she went nearly insane. Then when we stopped safe and sound, I chided her for being so unromantic. After all, a drive through exotic locations while serenading her with the songs of my people, and all she could do was scream. He lets out a clucking noise, but there's a gigantic smile on his face. So I take it she likes the cheeky behavior? Madame Stepanova asks, amused despite herself. Apparently being crazy enough to treat a canador, which average around 10 feet tall and a half-ton of raw muscle, claws, and plasma-resistant fur, means that you're either insane or can back it up. The insane are to be pitied. Those that can back it up, they really like. All across the board, humans have been getting along great with canador. There's something about our races that are just sort of clicking. The shyer and more timid people are content to be treated kindly, and the people that snap back at that sort of thing are getting respected. It's just working somehow. Well, that's good to hear. We got sent out to make friends if we could. Is it any wonder that's exactly what we're doing? Airfarce asks, and she has to concede the point.